Hello everyone, today is Tuesday and here we are with our reflection of the week, and today we're going to talk about a very important topic, and is how does your brain fuel its performance. There's been a lot of questions about the brain and the usage of glucose in terms of the main fuel, and that is one of the purposes of the brain to use a lot of glucose to enhance their own performance. Nowadays, we know that the brain also feeds from fats, which is a molecule that comes from the metabolism of fatty acids. Its name are ketone bodies. It is not just one molecule. Mainly, the brain uses one that is beta hydroxybutyrate, and that is one of the main players in terms of the fuel alternative that can be used by your brain when you deplete the glucose amount. But that doesn't mean that your brain just depends on glucose to allow its performance. In fact, it has been researched and proved that brain using ketone bodies has a lot of power in terms of cognitive functions, attention, and also memory pathways. So when you start using your brain to enhance the functions that it has, you believe probably because of the past science that was only from glucose, and from there you were extremely worried that you didn't have enough glucose. That's another myth that we have been now enlightened by the science, and now we can prove, and now we can see, and now we have the facts that many of the intermediate molecules from fat come from the metabolism of ketone bodies, and those ketone bodies are the ones that can be used not only by your brain but also your heart, your lungs, your kidneys, your muscles. All of those organs can use these ketone bodies, and they come from fat. In addition to that, we know that carbohydrates are also assembled by units of glucose. So you don't really have to increase the amount of simple sugars, which is the form that is most affected in terms of your body metabolism, and it makes it slower. So in fact, you can just switch to complex carbohydrates, and that would be a much wiser way to make your organism to use them by the time that the day lasts. So those are the facts that we know from the biochemistry that has been research now. Your brain uses a lot of oxygen also, and glucose, ketone bodies, to construct the new pathways. So when you are fasting, you are using those ketone bodies to boost your brain. That's why when you don't have too much food in your system, you also release a lot of energy from the digestive process, and that allows the brain to use a lot of energy that now it's going to use to repair a lot of connections, create new neurons, create new pathways, create new synapses. That's the purpose of allowing space in the meals, of allowing also alternative fuels to your brain. You are helping your brain by giving it the chance to use another alternative fuel. Overall, glucose is going to also be used in your body while you are using those ketone bodies. So we are really making our organism and making our organs a lot more efficient when we deplete the sugar sources, the simple sugar sources. So that's the idea of explaining these kind of alternative pathways that every organ has. In particular, right now, we are talking about the brain and mental health. When we also allow the brain to have too much sugar in terms of simple sugars, you are making your brain slower. You are not allowing it to have new neural pathways. You are making traffic in all of the glucose pathways, which entail many of the ones that are going to produce these kind of connections and rewiring of your brain. So the more time that you allow yourself to have space in the meals and also alternative fuels such as these monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats as also fuel for your brain so that it can use the fatty acids, so that it can use the ketone bodies, then you will make your whole body, your whole metabolism faster, and you will have more cognitive power to learn something, to retain something, and to increase the kind of connections and synapses that you are creating. Also, remember that in this kind of realm of glycolysis and all of the pathways that entail, such as the pentose phosphate pathway and the Krebs cycle, all of these assemble together and all of these are connected. In the pentose phosphate pathway, particularly, you are creating reductive power. You are creating NADP, which is a very powerful molecule that will reduce another one that is called glutathione. And glutathione has an extremely good power in terms of protecting you from reactive oxygen species. ROS is the name of this species, and it allows you to rejuvenate, to create these pathways, to start assembling better synapses, and also to prune your system, to get clean of the neurons and the pathways that you are not longer using. So it's like when at night in the streets of many cities, they are cleaning because they want the city to be clean in the morning. That's what your brain is doing in the night, and it is doing it by allowing that reductive power from NADP and the glutathione molecule in order to prune your system, in order to clean the system and start creating and rewiring your new synapses, your new pathways. Everything that you learn throughout the day, it's going to be connected through the night. That's why it is also important to sleep well, to sleep 6 to 8 hours. That's why it is also important to enhance your brain with exercise. Program exercise. It is not the same to have physical activity in your job or because you walk 2 or 3 or 4 blocks. That's not the same that doing it with an objective and doing it for a certain amount of time every 3 days per week or 4 days per week. That's the idea, because every time you also do exercise, you are cleaning your system, your brain, and pruning also those connections, creating new ones, releasing BDNF, which is a brain-derived neurotrophic factor that is going to allow protection to the new neurons. It's going to increase the number of neurons, and it's going to increase the number of synapses and pathways that you will have in your brain. So that's the idea of having more awareness of our brain health and how can we enhance those pathways with simple things, reducing simple sugars, allowing the brain to have fatty acids and ketone bodies to use them as fuel. Also, regulate the overall glucose mechanisms so that we can start allowing time for the pentose phosphate pathway to create the reductive power with NADP, which is a molecule that has an extremely good reductive power and energy inside of the molecule, inside of the phosphate bonds that it has, and also allowing the reduction of the glutathione molecule, which will rejuvenate, will protect your neurons, the axons, the dendrites, and every kind of pathway inside of your brain. That's the idea, to know more about ourselves, to know more about the pathways that we have, to enhance them, not just to rely on the things that we see in every spot in the media that are promoting glucose and those things. In fact, when you have a lot of glucose, as I mentioned before, you create traffic and your brains becomes slower. So the pathways are going to be pruned, are going to be, your memory is not going to have the same power, you won't have attention, you will increase anxiety, and you will increase the toxic cycles of thoughts by just consuming a lot of simple sugars. So allow your brain to have oxygen also. Allow your brain to have that oxygen. Remember that oxygen, it is needed to burn all of these glucose molecules. But if you have too much, there is not enough oxygen. And now, less, because we are using masks many times throughout the day, or when we go out, or whatever, if you are using it too much, you are not having the proper amount of oxygen. You are increasing the amount of CO2, and that also kills your neurons. So just be mindful about the brain health that you can enhance. Thank you, Laura, for connecting, and thank you for also sharing the information. I hope that these messages resonate with you and you start having more attention to the pathways that you have within yourself. Also, I didn't want to go before mentioning that this pentose phosphate pathway, it's going to allow you to create nucleotides. And nucleotides are the building blocks of your DNA. Your DNA is your hard drive that is going to be required in order to have much better quality proteins. So you are winning by reducing simple sugars, by increasing the good fats, and by also consuming complex carbohydrate instead of too much simple sugars. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Laura, for being here, and have a wonderful afternoon. I will see you next Sunday that I connect for the reflection of the weekend. If you like this video, if the information is good for you, please help me to share the information. Have a wonderful night, day, or afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thank you, Laura. Bye.